Hi, podcast listeners. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. We have so many guests on this show making a difference in our lives, making a difference all around the world with the expertise that they bring. And yet so many of you are reaching out to me saying, you want more. It's not enough just what we're putting on these podcast episodes for you. And so I am here to extend a very warm welcome to you to our Difference Maker community, where you can join for as little as $5 a month to get all this extra content. Out the gate, you're going to get 30 plus minisodes of exclusive content not available for the regular podcast listeners, and an exclusive minisode every month. And you'll get exclusive voting power to help us pick podcast topics and more. And that's at our Changers tier. There's 3 different main tiers and then an extra larger tier. But whatever tier that you join at, you will be included in this extra content. And I know that many of you are wanting to go a little bit deeper. And so even though it gets a little wild in there sometimes because of how deep we go, I want you to join us there. This extra content is very special. It means a great deal to me to be a part of this community with you. And I would love to just exchange ideas or perspectives that you have around these different episodes. And that's the place where we do it. So please show up to our Difference Maker community. Give us $5 out of your pocket every month. And I think that you'll have a lot of fun in there because we do. And I would love for you to join us. So go to patreon.com/A World of Difference to join us there. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm your hostess, Lori Adams Brown, and you're listening to episode 19. My guest on today's show is my great friend, Eva Leung, and she is just going to be such a great interview today because you guys are just really going to love her because everybody loves Eva. She's smart, really smart, went to Princeton smart, and just so full of joy and so friendly and a lot of fun and deeply spiritual and cares just so much. And you're going to hear her talk about faith and work in a way that's going to really inspire you. I just know it. I first met her in Singapore. She came out on a trip with some friends and was involved as a volunteer in some of the work we did. And even on that first meeting, she's just one of those people that just makes a great first impression as well. And she ended up, not long after we met her, even during that trip, she was doing an interview in Singapore for Merck Pharmaceuticals, which is a company she was working for in the US at the time in the Raleigh-Durham area. She, in the interview, got the job in Singapore and moved to Singapore and basically became a part of our family for several years. She's a chemical engineer and she worked for Merck, I don't know, maybe like 11 years or so in the US, as well as for several years in Singapore. And just recently started working for Lonza, which is a biotech company, and she's a sterility assurance senior manager there. She takes her work very seriously as a chemical engineer, and the work that she does is pretty great. Like even at Merck, she worked on Gardasil, which is an immunization that has helped save many lives, as well as she worked on Keytruda, which is a lung cancer drug that cured Jimmy Carter's lung cancer and many others' lung cancer. So just with that, even if she didn't even express herself spiritually in any way at work, just the work that she's been doing is really deeply meaningful to a lot of people and deeply spiritual in the sense that it's helping save so many lives. But in addition to that, she cares deeply about the coworkers that she has. And as she is in leadership positions at work, she certainly cares about that in a deeply spiritual way, in a way that she sees people not just as employees, but as people whom God loves and that she should love as her neighbor and as her coworker. And she tries really hard to do that well. And you're going to hear a little bit about that process for her today in the Singapore context as an expat living in Singapore. So I really hope that you have your ears open to the things that she has to teach us today. And I really hope that you have some nuggets to take away to inspire you in your own workplaces of how it can look as a scientist like her, as a chemical engineer like her, or whatever it is that you do in your career, that you can have some takeaways that will inspire you to work in a way where you bring your faith with you to work and it helps you work in a different way. So, welcome to the show, my friend Eva Leung. All right. Hi, Eva. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Hi, Lori. How are you?
Yeah,
Oh,
we miss you.
yes, I miss you too. I miss you. Oh, it's been so long.
I know. Well, even though Singapore and California are very far apart, there are a lot of things that we share in common living here in Singapore to what goes on, or what we have here in California to what goes on in Singapore in terms of like some of the faith and work conversation we're going to talk about today. So when I thought about doing this series, I immediately thought of you as somebody who would be great to talk about what it means to be a person of faith at work. So I'd love for you just to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, maybe some of your background, and also currently what your job is.
Sure. So my name is Eva Leung. I'm a follower of Christ, and I came from a family who did not follow him. 6 years ago, a coworker and friend shared with me at work, which I can elaborate later. And then now, I'm a believer now. As for my background, for where I came from, I'm a third culture kid. So as with many TCKs, I'm gonna have to give you my whole life history.
Yeah.
Um, but I was born and grew up in Arizona from first generation immigrants from Hong Kong. And then when I was 8, I moved to Singapore. When I was high school, I moved to Hong Kong, and my parents moved back to Hong Kong and stayed there. And then after that, I went to college in the US and stayed there working for a large pharmaceutical company. And through the company and also through God's leading, I moved to Singapore. Um, yeah, just around 4 years ago. I'm still in Singapore now, and I've been working in a quality assurance, also in a pharmaceutical company. So my role there includes ensuring that our products are safe for patients to take.
It's awesome. I always feel like you kind of save the world every day in your job. And definitely during COVID, when I see that they're making these vaccines, I often think of you and what it was like. Because you worked on Gardasil, is that right? In your
I
previous?
did. I
Yeah.
worked on Gardasil, Keytruda, MMR vaccines, so a lot of the childhood vaccines for a while. Um, yeah, and now I'm working for a contract manufacturing company, so I can't, propriety-wise, I can't share a lot of them. But then I am working on a couple of COVID treatments, which is exciting.
Nice.
Hmm.
Very
Yeah.
promising. Thank you
Hmm.
for doing that. It's like such important work right now. And even my seventh graders, they're doing this unit, I guess, in the California curriculum where they're learning about the cell. And they're on this weird kick now during COVID where they watch these YouTube videos of people are like, nothing you learn in school really matters. Like, you don't even need, they don't even teach you how to do your taxes in school and all these things you really need for life. And they're like, we're having to learn about like, the different parts of the cell. I'm like, what? That's so important. Like, if people don't know about the different parts of the cell, how are we ever going to find a vaccine for COVID? Like,
Yeah.
and they were like, oh, that's true.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's hysterical.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure at some point in your life, though, as you were growing up and you were a student, you had a moment in time where you felt that this was a career path you wanted to take. And kind of what was that sort of story for you? How did that moment happen? Was it more of a process? Was it chosen for you? Did you feel like you chose it?
Um, It was a little bit of both, as with most things.
Yeah.
I always knew I wanted to work in healthcare because I just wanted to objectively make a difference in people's lives. I felt like with healthcare, there was no debate that you are helping. Um, so then when I went to college, I pursued the closest degree I could get to that without being a doctor because blood still scares me. So yeah, so I went into chemical engineering, and then with that though, I always had the hope to well, I originally had the hope to make a robot with a humanoid body parts, and then you can exchange them with a real humans, and it's the exact plot of Bicentennial Man, and I've always wanted to do that. But then yeah, just one thing led to another, different opportunities that came up, and I landed in a large pharmaceutical company, and I loved it ever since. Just loved working with yeah, love working with different products and knowing that after we manufacture these products, they'll go and literally do save people's lives from very dangerous diseases. So it's been very rewarding, and yeah, I don't see myself ever wanting to leave that as of yet. Mm,
Yeah, no, no reason not to. It's as important as it's ever been in 2020 for sure.
mm.
So we alluded to something earlier when you were giving your background, but I wanted to know if, do you have anyone in your life, maybe growing up or maybe in your adult years, that has modeled for you any particular aspect that inspires you as a person who has a faith at work?
Yeah. So there's two people. One person is I one person was instrumental in leading me to faith, but I wouldn't. Yes. So one person was he goes by the name of Scott. He's my boss's boss. And I didn't know for a long time that he was a person of faith, but there were many things while working for him that I saw that made him different. So I actually worked with him in Virginia, and when he moved to North Carolina with the pharmaceutical company, I followed him because I'm like, I really like how this man works. He really cares for his people. He leads well, and I always felt that he was very fair. And he also always fought for us, and I just really liked that about him. So he I worked with him for I think a total of 6 years, and yeah, he was always very loving to his people, which I really appreciated. But he also taught us a lot about how like servant leadership. Um, yeah, so watching him, I always saw how he really cares for people, and from caring for people, from leading, from knowing how people worked below him, then he was able to lead from above, and just really appreciated and loved working for him. He was also instrumental in leading me to faith. He was very um, uh, he was very good about walking that delicate line between sharing your faith at work as a boss, and also but knowing that this is very important truth that people need to know. So I remember I might need to go back and tell my story later, but I remember there was a time where I was in his office crying because I had just gone through the breakup. Um, and he like listened to me. He let me cry in his office, and then at one point he paused and he said, "Eva, there's just something I really want to tell you, but I can't tell you at work. Do you mind if my wife tells you outside of work, if you don't mind meeting with her?" And I just knew him so well, and I trusted him so well that I'm like, yeah, sure, like anything that could help me at that moment. And he and his wife was able to share the gospel with me that way, um, and I just knew that this was a truth that was coming from someone out of love, as opposed to someone who just had a second agenda.
Mm,
Mm.
that's so awesome. It's such a kind and loving and patient way. And I even love just the part of like, I'm trying, I think probably our stereotype, at least maybe mine is, of a pharmaceutical company is it's very maybe devoid of a lot of emotional moments. Like it just seems very scientific, very calculated. There's these, vaccines being produced, people are wearing lab coats and I don't know, doing things on computers. But this moment where you're, crying because you're a human being and you're not a robot and you
Yeah.
do, you have, life happens and, just to have a boss in any company to be open to
Mhm.
that is really special. And yeah, there's a lot of diversity and inclusion, sort of seminars that go on here in the Silicon Valley on these different companies where they're like, get to know your coworkers, know them as a human being, not just as a person that produces results. And it sounds like he just kind of instinctively knew how to do that with you, like saw you as a human being with feelings, and that you needed
Mhm.
someone to listen and care for you, even outside of work. That's really sweet. I would think that would be compelling for any of us.
Yeah, I think it's very easy at work because you do have a role and you're trying to complete a task in order to help the company make more money, and that's why you were hired. Um, but sometimes I even have to catch myself when I see someone come by, um, and I'm like, oh, this is he has a document I have to read, and I have to be able to get back to him. So then I see him as like a document. I see him as an email I need to respond, as opposed to an actual human being. And that's when I really need to pause and be like, no, this is someone who is made in the image of God, and God really loves. And therefore, I need to remember to also love him too, and that he is more than a document. He is more than an email that I need to respond to. Yeah.
Wow, that's really good. I think all of us could use that reminder. Even those of us who work in ministry and things like that, we can get so focused on tasks and using people to complete a task, instead of having a task that we work around together to develop each other and love each other in the process. It's a totally different approach. And
Hmm.
I'm sure that's challenging for anybody at work, but especially where it could be, so detached sometimes in a place like pharmaceutical company. It must have its own challenges, but it sounds like you really saw something different there and it was compelling. And I know you mentioned another person. Did you want to share the story about the other person?
Yeah, sure. Um, so when I was working at this pharmaceutical company, I wasn't a believer, and I had walked my life with a really close coworker who became a friend as well. Her name is Tiffany, and we had known each other also for I think around 4 years at that point, so not as long. Um, but so we became really good friends, and at that point in my life, I was a little bit younger. I was around 25, and she walked with me in my life, and she saw me go through a series of breakups with people, and I was just really devastated. And then for each of the breakups that I had, it was increasingly worse. I think as I was willing to invest more in my emotions, and it just got more and more painful. At one point, I had dated someone at work who uh, who really broke my heart at the time. But I always had to see him at work, so it was just really painful. So then I remember crawling underneath someone's desk and just crying, and they would just hide me in the corner until I can get over it, and then come back out and work again. Oh, it's just such an emotional time. Um, and I, it took me a while to get out of it. I had tried so many different things. I went to a therapist who helped me get to a level where I can actually maybe be a little bit more functional. I went to codependency, like small groups. I went to, I tried to exercise a lot more. I tried to eat healthy. I tried all these self-help things. Um, and and throughout it all, Tiffany saw me through it. She tried to help me as much as she can. I was at her house a lot. She cooked for me because I couldn't. Uh, at that time, I couldn't even remember to eat because I was so emotional. And she just really loved me throughout that time. And I remember at one point when I was a little bit more functional, she had taken me out for dinner, and I just told her, like, Tiffany, like, this is my treat because you really helped me through this time. I'm just so grateful for you. Um, and I promise that the next time I go through a breakout, this won't happen. I'll be stronger. I really will. And Tiffany, um, she actually paused, and then she started yelling at me because it's really odd, but we have that type of relationship where it actually works. But she yelled at me, and she was like, Eva, this will always happen again because you are putting your faith on man and who is fallible instead of God who is infallible. And at that point, I was like, what? Like, Tiffany's a Christian? And which I didn't know at the time. Um, And also I was in my mind I had thought Christians were these crazy people who believed in a fantasy and didn't really believe in truth, and therefore wouldn't believe in science, and therefore wouldn't believe in hard work. Um, but I knew Tiffany. I knew she was very smart. I knew she was a very hardworking coworker. We both worked on the same projects, and I just knew she was smart and someone who I can trust and isn't a crazy Christian person. Um, so I listened to her, and she shared the gospel with me. At that point, I didn't immediately come to believe, um, but I continued going back to her because I wanted to know more about why she believed that this God is real, that this God interacts with her constantly, and that this God would actually love me. Like when I found myself so unlovable, and when I, and that I felt like was corroborated by all the bad relationships that I have had. So I think after around 6 months of just intense Bible study, intense questioning of Tiffany, and then of different people in the church, I decided to make that leap to come to faith. It didn't mean that everything was perfect after that, or that even my faith was completely um, like so strong that it wasn't unbreakable. Um, but uh, after being involved with the church and just really learning more um, from from many different interactions with God, I just there's no way I could live my life without Christ now. Mm.
It's so awesome. I just love that story. And I love Tiffany. I love how you guys have that kind of relationship. And it's such a good example for us of loving people well in those hard moments. And I'm sure you have looked at your work in a different way now that you do have faith as opposed to what it was like before. So, yeah, I'm curious to know, what role does your faith play in how you approach your job differently now?
Yeah. Um, yes, definitely with work. Um, there are always many opportunities to change things because I mean work is difficult. Um, yep, God um, from Genesis made it that way too. Made it the ground that was hard to grow things in, and it is hard. Um, I feel like faith really impacts how I work in every aspect, including like how I work, how I interact with my peers, my boss, my customers, and how I deal with difficulty from day to day as well. Um, for me, I really believe that God gave me the gift of encouragement from 1 Corinthians 12:8. Just so I seek ways day to day on how I can encourage people as much as possible. Um, so I really try to look for the good that people are trying to do at work, and then I hone in on that perspective, and I try to encourage it, and I try to build it up. Um, I think it really ties into a lot of things they teach you at work on through corporate training. I think a couple years ago there was a really famous book called Strength Finders 1.0, I guess, and now 2.0 by Tim Roth. And it's a great book that just talks about how you're trying to find your strengths and build upon them at work. Um, and the concept is that well, if you focus your efforts on things you're good at, then you can just really be able to build a career through those strengths. And I really think that one way that my gift that God has given me of encouragement that can be used is to encourage those strengths in other people at work. So I try to do that a lot. Um, I Someone also told me a while ago that with work, there's a lot of things that make work very unpleasant. There's a lot of times it's the culture, or it could be a problem at work that people just continue to face. Um, and he told me that if God was the CEO of my company, how would he run it? And
Mm.
it made me, yeah, and it made me really think about things that I must might be frustrated at work, um, or things that I feel like needs to be changed in order for me to actually like working at work. Um, and I that really helped me put into perspective of how I can really try to change things and redeem a fallen world. So, for example, at my workplace, there's tends to be a very big blame culture, where people tend to blame each other. Um, so I try very hard to not do that, but also just even when I'm at fault, I'll point that out and be like, "Oh, I'm at fault here. This is what I had said before, but I made a mistake." Um, and just be very humble and very open and transparent of the different faults that I have. And I think in the corporate world, we usually see that as weakness when
Yeah.
you try to, yeah, when you admit your faults. You should be this strong person and always go out and never admit that you're wrong and always, and then you can fake it until you make it kind of deal. Um, but I really have been able to see that when I have, I've put my faith in God to, who has asked us to be humble and to lead through as a servant, that he honors that, and I see it even when I interact with my coworkers. So when I'm humble and I tell them at fault, they really are taken aback, and they're very shocked, and they are very respectful of me as a result that I would actually admit faults. And I think when we're transparent, we're actually able to get to the bottom of the problem as well and actually fix it. Um, Another thing that I can think of, for God, when he, like, if God was the CEO of my company,
Yeah.
how he could change it. Yeah, I really see it in this COVID time also, because with video chatting, and sometimes without video chatting, I in my work we have conferences all the time, and we don't turn on the video. It's just through the phone, and with customers is also hard too, because we don't share the same platform, so you have to do it through just verbally and not with the camera. Um, and I think when people don't see that there's another human being on the end of the line, um, they forget that they're actually a human being with feelings. And So there's a lot of with COVID, with more of the online conferencing, um, people have been a lot more rude and a lot more unloving towards other people. Um, and I've been really needing to learn how to be more loving towards other people through COVID and needing to verbally do that. Um, and I think it's definitely made a difference on how people interact when when even if you're being yelled at, you're being calm, and you're hearing and trying to listen for what their concerns are and trying to address it, as opposed to just trying to yell back, because it's just yeah, that's not how Jesus would respond as well. Yeah.
Wow, that's so good. It's so practical. And, it's clear that you're approaching your workday not as somebody who puts their faith on the weekends or, after hours, but you're clearly bringing it into work and even allowing what it means to follow Jesus and allow his character to mold you and shape you and to continue to learn and do so. Which is, really my understanding of what it means to be a disciple of Christ, a follower of Christ, is that you're constantly growing and learning in that area, and it makes you a better person, right? A better worker, whatever your
Mhm.
job is. So, yeah, what if you just could say what you think it is about you that's making a difference at your work or in your career? What do you think that is?
Um, it's I might get overly spiritual at this point. Okay. Um, so for it's really hard for me to say that I'm making a difference, me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I really do feel that just me is not sufficient. I think when I look back on how I worked before I was a believer, I really did feel like it was just me. I felt like I was the only person who was preventing the rest of the business to be just release product that is unsafe for people, which is not true, because we have many controls. But I felt that way. I felt that it was me against everybody else.
Mhm.
And I felt like I was the only one who knew everything. Um, and everybody else didn't. Um, but after coming into faith, I just come to realize um, how small one person is. But I don't see that as not empowering.
Mhm.
Um, I I see that as I need God a lot more in my life to be able to even do my job at work. So when you ask me what difference I'm making personally, I don't know if I'm making a big enough difference by myself, but I know that with God and Him moving through me, He will make sure to make more of a difference. So, for example, like when we talked about the different cultures at work, some of the negative cultures, one person might not be enough to lead as an example, but with God's help, hopefully more people will see through me how I love others, and then uh, He will soften people's hearts and move from there as well. Um, yeah, so it's really hard for me to say it just me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but yeah, it's really a lot of reliance on God to help out. So I'm just thinking of different examples. But just this week, I met with a customer, and I had met with them 2 times beforehand, and we had presented a proposal, and they were very convinced that it was going to be, it was going to be good. But then on the last meeting when we were supposed to decide whether to accept the proposal or not, they sent an email and just said they're not going to accept the proposal beforehand. And yeah, and I was very shocked because the majority of the proposals were my proposals, and it was to make things a lot easier for our company and also for them as well. Um, so like by myself, I wouldn't know what to do. I prayed and asked for wisdom, and uh, it I just trusted God that He will do something as well. But in addition to that, like I knew that I wasn't enough, so I actually went to a old boss of mine who had worked with them and asked for his advice. And he told me that um, he showed me a book called "Never Split the Difference" from Chris Voss.
Yeah. I know that
Yeah,
book.
yeah, it's a
You know.
great book.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So in the book, they talk about tactile empathy, about being able to show other people that you care about them, your concerns are listened, and using that to try to negotiate a proposal. So he was teaching me that, and then as I was hearing some of the pointers that he was telling me, I just realized that oh, these are just ways to show people how to love them and how to love them well, and this is actually very biblical. So then when I was meeting with a customer and going through the proposals, those were the tactics that I used, but it was ways to love them well. And the customer was very famous for being very abrasive, but when I talked and when I was able to show them that I value their viewpoints and I value their concerns, um, and there's other ways of looking at it, and this is what my experience has shown. um, they they were very softened to the idea, and they at the end they accepted my proposals.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was very rewarding in terms of the business sense, but also just it increased my faith a lot too, that through prayer and through loving other people, um, God can make miracles where I saw it. And so it's definitely like a when you're making a difference, it's more of a group effort um, with many different people, but also even at that time, I was on the call with the customer, but it wasn't just me and the customer. I had a whole team of people who were listening in, which was also very nerve-wracking. Um, but uh, but I'm hoping that they also saw how I interacted with the customer and saw how even though they said no, I was able to show my care for them and be able to persuade them in another way, and also be willing to just go with what the customer says if that's the conclusion, because it's also a way of showing care, you know. So yeah.
That's awesome. I love that example. It's amazing how just stopping to pray for wisdom. I'm just reading in Second Chronicles right now in the scripture Old Testament, um, which Jewish people would call the Torah, and our Muslim friends would call the Taurat. And there's just this moment where Solomon, God appears to Solomon, and he's like, what do you want? I'll give you whatever you want. And he asks for wisdom. And because of wisdom, he ends up getting riches and all these other things, because when you're wise, a lot of things follow. But God, he wants to give wisdom to those who ask. And so, yeah, it's one of those really cool stories that you're sharing where that showed up for you kind of right away in a very practical way. And you were able to allow that wisdom to be seen by others, which can be very contagious as well,
Mhm.
in a positive way, not in a contagious negative way, which probably your company deals with a lot. Positive contagion.
Yeah.
Well, what advice would you have? Because there's probably people listening right now who, they have faith in God, and they have not really known how to bring that at all to work. It's something they've kept separate in a very compartmentalized box, maybe that they open up on Sundays or, in the after hours, but not at work. And so, what advice would you have to someone who's just trying to get started on what it looks like to allow their faith to impact them at work?
Yeah, I think there are a number of ways. Definitely to start out with is knowing that your faith is not just restricted to Sundays, that it should guide how you live your life from Monday to Saturday. And I think I think just acknowledging that would help. From there, I think when you start living out your faith at work, for me, it's easiest when I realize that when there's a conflict, um, there's actually two sins that are usually in place. If there's something about someone else's sin, but most likely there's something with your sin that you have to deal with. Um, so from there, I usually try to introspectively look at myself and think about what am I dealing with right now that's making me angry, or what am I dealing right now that's making me behave in a way that's not Christ-like. And from there, I usually ask myself the question. Tiffany actually taught me to ask this question too, but it was, what in the gospel do I not believe in right now to feel this way or to act this way? Um, and so, for example, I think sometimes when I'm very defensive about something at work, I have to, I'll realize that I'm being defensive, and I think about, oh, what about this am I feeling, and why am I reacting this way? And usually for me, it's a matter of pride. I have a lot of pride in my work, and a lot of pride that I think I know what's best. Um, and then what I don't believe in the gospel at that point when I'm dealing with pride is I don't believe that God made uh, everybody in His image, that He loves everybody and He gifted everybody in a certain way, and I don't believe the other person is someone worthy of God's love. So then I have to step back and remember, no, this is a person with also concerns, and if I'm being defensive about it, I'm just not. being convincing enough, or maybe I'm not convinced my own self to be able to convince the other person. So that's that would be another way to be helpful, to integrate faith and work. And I think as you do this, you'll see more of how God really loves loves you in how you work. That sounds really odd. That. Um, I, yeah, I let me go back. So I think oftentimes people think of work after the fall, um, but work actually came to us before the fall.
Mhm.
Um, when God created heaven and earth and the garden for us, He first commanded Adam to work the garden.
Mhm.
Um, so work by itself is a, a process with that you that God wants us to do with Him. It's a way of redeeming the world. And I think when you start seeing that in work, in your relationships, it's a way to really see God move in the workplace. And then as you start seeing God moving in the workplace, for me, I have a sense of awe of seeing Him be able to move, both in just the tasks that I need to do, but also in the relationships, which I find a lot harder. Um, so when I start seeing God move, I also am more inspired to share about how He's moving, because it is amazing how He does it. Uh, so I think it's as people start integrating faith and work, I see it as you need to acknowledge that God had intent for work. Um, you're part of God's work in that way. And then from there, we should be in awe of how God can work, even in our day to day lives. And we should want to share that with everybody. And then from sharing, it's just all celebrating together. And that's a form of worship.
I love it. I love just how you described that, and work as a way of redeeming the world. And um, yeah, when we think about it from that perspective, there's so many different ways we can work unto God. Some people, at least in the Christian faith community, there's a lot of assumptions that the only way you could really be involved in God's honoring work of redeeming the world would be to be like in some kind of full-time ministry position. But it's just so limiting to think that way because there's so many
Yeah.
aspects of this world that we need, to be redeemed. I think I read something that you'd posted recently on social media where you're talking about like if somebody prays for bread and there's no baker, like, like we need the
Mhm.
bakers. If somebody gets sick, they need somebody, a healthcare worker to take care of them. Like that is part of God's redemption in the world too. And we need our basic needs met, and a lot of that happens through work that people do. And we need vaccines to help us get through this
Mhm.
pandemic and finish it, get it over with, and all those things. But I know that you also you're a person who's been very blessed, and you want to not just be blessed, but you want to be a blessing. And so I know that you don't limit the ways you're making an impact just to your work. I know that you do some volunteering to help, kids and different things. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that and how um, you're trying to be a blessing to other people as well outside of work. There's more than just work, Eva.
uh, definitely. Definitely, workplace ministry is my heart, but I do do a lot of things outside of work as well. I think uh, God really blessed me by bringing me to Singapore and back here. Um, it's really opened my eyes of living in a country as a kid is very different from living in a country as an adult.
Hmm.
So I realized when I was a kid, I was really living in a little bubble.
Mhm.
So when I moved to Singapore as an adult, I just realized how many different cultures there are here. And I really enjoy learning about all the different cultures that are in Singapore. Um, I I remember when I first came here, there was like I saw on a website that there was 42 different people groups in Singapore, and I think now there's even more. So that's been really exciting. Um, I'm trying to think. Sorry, what was your question?
I think you've been doing like some volunteering with some kids and tutoring and things like that. Are you still involved with some of that, or do you do other kinds of volunteering?
I'm not too involved with the volunteering with kids anymore, but I'm still really close friends with them.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so there's there's a family I used to volunteer with, and there's two kids, and actually the son just messaged me, which is really funny. Um, but there's two kids, one girl and one boy, and I just developed a love and a relationship with them. So we go out very often. Um, uh, yes, just to hang out and just to love on them. They came to my house for the first time actually this weekend, because usually we just go out and to watch. So yeah, they came to my house to watch a movie, and I was just able to share with them the different things in my house, and yeah, so they're Muslim, so they don't eat pork. But when they came to my house, I made sure that they ate McDonald's, which is halal in Singapore. But for me, like I'm on a diet, so I actually had to eat something that I cooked myself, which had pork in it. And the kids were so shocked. I was like, "Why are you eating pork? That's so bad." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't believe that. Um, that I don't. I believe that the Son of God came to earth to die for us, and when he died, he took away all the sins, and and allowed us to eat all of this in freedom. So that's what I believe in, and therefore I do eat these spaghetti and meatballs, which was actually really good. Yeah, and they're like, "Oh, okay. But you ate pork," and I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And then when they came over, they actually saw I have a bookshelf, and it has a lot of stuffed pigs on it because when I was a kid, they for some reason I had a fascination with pigs. And they were also very shocked. They're like, why are there pigs?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I think they're really cute. Do you think they're cute?" And they're like, "No, no, I don't think they're cute." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. That's okay though. I think, I understand it, and I say these things because it shows the melting pot of cultures in Singapore.
Yep.
Um, but I was so glad to be able to share with them that this is my faith, and I'm an example of someone who loves them very well, um, but is of a different faith. Um, so I was really glad I was able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about this before, but there's a lot of, and it's sort of commonly known in Singapore, but there's a lot of disparity in the access to certain levels of education outside of the tradition, like just the typical what's provided by the government. So a lot of people do these like tutoring centers,
Mm.
but if you're a family that can't afford that, it really makes it hard to pass the PSLE exam and whatever. And I just know that any child who gets invested in by somebody who, whether it's a tutor or just somebody who believes in them and cares for them, and it's just like that kind of even mentoring relationship is so important. So I love that you've been involved in that because it is just a way to make a difference even outside of work in people's lives. And I know that you've really impacted those kids. It's really sweet. Well, I also would love, just my last question is if you have any resources that have been helpful to you along your journey at all. I know you mentioned a book earlier, but I mean, I don't know, it could be songs, podcasts, any thought leaders that you follow, movies, books, any particular thing that you feel like has been helpful to you. It may be faith and work related, or it could just be in your journey of your career or your spiritual journey. Anything like that that would be helpful that you'd recommend.
Um, I really recommend Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller. I think he does a really good job of framing how God sees work. Um, and I think oftentimes people can be very siloed in their own work and think it's very special, but when you see how God sees it, it's a paradigm shift. So I do really recommend that book. For me personally, I recently got married. So yay!
Good marriage.
Um,
We watched it on Zoom.
Yay! Yes, my Zoom COVID wedding. It was great. Um, yeah. So I'm reading a book. Well, I finished reading a book that had a huge impact on me. It was called "When Sinners Say I Do" by Dave Harvey. I actually got it from you, Lori, when you were moving. I took it off your bookshelf. Yeah. um, so yeah, it's a great book about how when two sinners marry each other, and we're all sinners, there are many different things that we have to think about in order to love each other better. Um, and I not only apply that to my own marriage, but also in my interactions with people at work. And it's been very rewarding. I, by nature, am not a patient person at all. Um, yeah, so I struggle a lot with that. But it has helped me just uh, it has helped me see that other people are also not patient with me too. So it's allowed me to help give people a little bit more grace. Yeah, so that's been good. Um, I also so in terms of movies, I love movies, but a lot of them are really like I really like dumb, thoughtless movies, so I don't have to think. So I don't really have too much to offer other than an old movie popped up in my Netflix the other day, and I'm like, oh, I love this movie. It definitely made an impact in my life, and it was Pay It Forward.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember that.
yeah, I really love that movie. I often think of that too
Mm.
with life because there's a lot of people in my life who have really blessed me and really encouraged me over the years. Scott and Tiffany is definitely two of those individuals, yourselves as well. I definitely remember all those days and nights I've been at your house, and you guys just impart so much wisdom on me.
Or,
Yeah,
or older child.
yes, your oldest child that you did not know you had. Um, but yeah, I think from with Pay It Forward as a um, without giving it away, but it was all about trying to instead of thanking the person that gave you so much, you try to pay it not pay it back, but pay it forward to someone else. And that's a way to really love the person who gave you so much. So I really that movie really made an impact on me. You know.
Yeah, that's a good one. Good reminder. I should watch that with my kids because it's an old enough one where they wouldn't have seen it otherwise. But
Mm.
yeah, it's a good thing. I have a friend that passed away recently. I think a lot of us in COVID have had a lot of death around us, and she didn't die from COVID. It was unexpected, just a little bit older than me. But she's a person who made an impact in a lot of people's lives. We were in grad school together, and she spent some years in China, and just really an amazing person, and really invested in women leaders in particular. And it's one of those things like, once after her death, suddenly it was one of those you could never go to her now and say thank you for what else she's, modeled for you and the example she was and how much she encouraged all of us. So now we're left, our only real option is to pay it forward, in that
Mm.
way. It's like, just, live out her life with other people, do the things that she would do if she were still here, and, help that legacy that she leaves to live on in other people. But we don't have to wait for people to pass away to do that kind of thing. I think it's a good
Mm.
reminder. That movie's a really good one.
Uh, so I think you were asking me like how to start integrating faith and work, and
Yeah.
uh, one other thing is just to let people know that you are a Christian. I think sometimes people um, we all think we're undercover agents of Christians at work, and it doesn't need to be that way. We I rem And what made me think about this is actually Tiffany, because when she finally shared with me, actually had no idea that she was a Christian. So we always joke about this, but I had breakups before that she had not shared with me that the gospel, and I'm like, you could have shared with me so much earlier, and it would have been so much better. I didn't have to go through all these horrible breakups, and she was like, oh yeah, haha. Um, but So I think it's very important to be able to be open about your faith at work, that you are a Christian. I think from there, people can see that the reason why that you're different at work is most likely because of your faith. Um, so when I started working in Singapore, I was actually very open that I really believe in God, that I do pray outside of work, more than at church, or maybe at church. Um, and from there, people started identified me as the Christian, which I mean, I'm fine with that. That's good. Um, yeah, and then it actually led to a lot of opportunities to share as well, about my faith and why I see things a certain way. I
Mhm.
had a coworker who was about to get married to someone who's Catholic, but she was not a believer. And at the time, I think the grandma of the groom was very wanted her to convert to the faith. Immediately, and she was very resistant to that idea, and she didn't want to do it just for marriage. Yeah. So we were able to sit down outside of work, and I was able to share with her like the faith and why I believe in this, and why I believe that Jesus came to die for us. That is very important. Um, and so she can learn more about the faith, not in the context of I need to believe in this in order to get married, but just and not have a secret agenda, but from someone that she knew and she trusted, um, and go from there. Fortunately, did not come to faith, but I was just really honored to be part of that journey, of God planting seeds in her.
Yeah, no, of course. And even if the end result wasn't, that you agreed on, faith necessarily, just deepening friendships, deepening relationships with people at work and outside of work when you open yourself up to being the kind of person that's approachable, that's safe to talk to. And that's always a good first step. I hear that
Mhm.
quite a bit from people who are um, just trying to start their journey of bringing the faith part of themselves to work, just like bringing your whole self there, including that faith part. That a good way to start is just to let people know that if you ever want to have this conversation, I want to be that safe person for you. And
Mhm.
I won't like get mad at you if you don't agree or anything like that. But this is a
Right.
safe place to question each other and explore and be open. That's an
Mhm.
awesome story. I'm glad that you shared that.
I love that.
Well,
Yeah.
Eva, you're awesome. I love you so much. You're such a great example of faith and work. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. I'm sure people are going to take away tons of really good nuggets here. And just thank you for the work you're doing on all that you can't tell us about. And hopefully something COVID related. Yeah. Blessings on you and your work, of course, and your marriage and just everything. Hang in there during COVID. It's not easy.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. I really miss you guys.
I know. When this is all over, somebody's going to fly somewhere, either you to us or us to you, and we'll get to see each other again. But in the meantime, take care and thanks for
Thank,
being on the show.
thank you. I really appreciate it. I have lots of hope for your podcast.
Aw, you're so sweet.
Mhm.
All right. Bye, Eva.
Bye.
Didn't you guys just love her? Wow. I wish you could meet her in person. For those of you that know her in real life, you know what I'm talking about. She's incredible. And she got married during COVID. We watched her wedding on Zoom. It was not the way it was supposed to be, but she's married to Evan, who's a great guy. He's a photographer. They're a really sweet couple. It felt like we were marrying off our daughter in some ways, even though I'm not old enough to really be her mom. Eva's just such a part of our family, and she's just so amazing, so smart, so full of friendship and joy, and just has so much to offer this world. I'm so glad you guys got to know her on this podcast today. I hope that you were inspired. I hope that you have some things in your brain now to help you kind of see how it can be and to think through what it could look like for you to bring your faith to work in new and different ways. Eva began to follow Jesus because of a coworker. And I hope you took that story for all that it is. It means everything to her. Faith and work, from the moment she started having conversations with people who brought their faith to work, has never been the same for her. And she's deeply passionate about this conversation. And she doesn't do it in a way that, she's proselytizing or she's pushing her faith on anyone. She does it in such a natural way, in a way where it really is, it's so important to her. She wants to listen. She wants to hear where people are coming from. She speaks 4 languages. She wants to hear people talk about their own cultures and their own religions and their own expressions in different ways. And because of her being a third culture kid in this way, she brings a real diversity and perspective to it, and cares so deeply. So I hope that you have some takeaways of how you are inspired by Eva. She's amazing. So next week, you're in for another great guest. My friend Michael Crane is going to be on the show. I met him in college, so I've known him for years. He was best man in our wedding because he became good friends with my husband. And they're just hilarious when they're together. But so my husband will not be involved in this interview because it would be too funny, and I can't let him outshine me. So, but Michael's going to be on the show. He is not only a third culture kid who grew up in several different countries, but he also brings a perspective and a passion for just urban strategy and urban work. He's going to talk about that, but he has a lot to say about this faith and work conversation. So I'm really excited to interview him next week and for you guys to hear his perspective on just this whole conversation, on what it could be, to give us a more of a bigger imagination of what it could look like, and why it's important on more of a strategic level for our cities and our workplaces. So tune in next week for Michael Crane, and I hope you guys have an awesome week. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear your masks, and do what it takes to help this pandemic get under control in this cold weather season in North America. I'm there with you. As the Bay Area has begun to go more into shelter in place, we're making certain sacrifices and hoping it makes a difference for our ICUs and for our healthcare workers out there who are really paying a huge price to keep us all healthy and safe. So stay safe, everybody, and let's pray for each other as we try to walk through this. Talk to you guys next week. Bye. As we're finishing this episode, if you're thinking, I really wish I could learn more or go a little bit deeper, well, that's what our Difference Maker community is for. I would love to welcome you in to join the rest of us there. Once again, it's only $5 a month to join, the price of a latte at your local coffee shop. You can join at our Changers tier. Difference Makers is a community that really means so much to me. It's very special because each time I have a guest on the show, I record something outside of what we give to just the regular podcast audience, where we go a little bit deeper, and then I post those video episodes in this community and we can discuss them. But also at the very beginning tier, which is our Changers tier of this community, you'll get exclusive voting power and help pick podcast topics that give us, more of what we want from your perspective. You'll have access to exclusive 30 plus mini-sodes that aren't out there for the general public. And you'll get every month an exclusive monthly bonus mini-sode. At our Groundbreakers level, which is $10 a month, you can join and get all of that, but also priority access to submit questions to the podcast. And you'll get an additional 2 exclusive monthly bonus mini-sodes. And at our Trailblazers tier, which is $15 a month, the price of 3 lattes a month, you can get all of that, plus also 3 exclusive monthly bonus minisodes, and a patron shout out. So I would love for you to join us at any of those tiers. It'll help you come into this community, be in the midst of all of us, other difference makers, and we'd love to hear your perspective. I certainly would. It's a place to engage more with me and the audience around what you like, what you're resonating with, and once again, go deeper with each of our guests. So please join us in this membership community. I would love to hear your perspective and love to share this extra content with you. So show up at patreon.com/a world of difference.